Greetings viewers, it's the 100 square inch tier list for 2025 where we're going to be ranking 29 100 square inch rackets to tell you which are good, which are mid, and most importantly, which are a complete waste of money. We're going to be going with the methodology that we've used for the last couple of tier lists where C tier is our baseline, it's our average. These are frames that don't necessarily stand out in any meaningful way, but they are completely fine. Nothing is really good, nothing is really bad. In B tier, we have rackets that are above average. So one or two characteristics about these frames are gonna take them beyond what we could expect from C tier, a little special, a little bit of extra playability for your dollar. In A tier, we have rackets that are really starting to be outstanding. A couple 2, 3, 4 metrics of playability that really stand above C or B tier. These rackets are gonna start to have this specialness, a little bit of extra character. In S tier, we're gonna have the rackets that are truly special, unique, strong racket identities. They're fun to use and they are bolstered by extremely strong all-around performance, if not absolutely excelling to the top of the class in specific categories. Then of course we have our meme tiers D and F. D is just going to be above average, and F tier are rackets that I just don't understand why racket manufacturers even bother making rackets with such terrible playability or inaccessible specs. We're going to be doing this by brand, so you can skip to whatever brand you want below, but we'll start with Babolat. So this is the Pure Drive. This mold has been around for over 30 years. It's one of the longest standing molds. It really, I think, defines what modern rackets are today. Stiff, powerful, graphite frames that offer great all-around performance, excellent stability, power, and spin. The Pure Drive, honestly, is a really strong baseline. The Babolat Pure Drive has this edge-to-edge sweet spot, so your performance on center is just as good as it is off center. The feel is quite solid. It's more connected than you would think, and I would also like to say comfort is better than you would think as well. The frame is tremendously predictable no matter where you hit it on the string bed, so also control is way higher than you would expect. I personally feel relatively connected to the Pure Drive. It's a racket that I can take into a match and know exactly what I'm going to expect out of it. I think this is a strong stalwart in A tier, really defines the segment for what an A tier frame is. Moving on, we have the Babolat Pure Aero Rafa Origin. So this is a crazy racket because it's insanely heavy. Generally, the average swing weights are ranging between 350 and 370 strong, which is going to be way outside the spec range for basically all recreational players and even most pros, with the exception of the man this racket is really made for, and that's Rafael Nadal. While it is extremely special, fun factor is absolutely tremendous. You really feel like Rafa when you use this frame. It's one that you'll want to have in your collection if you're a collector, but the lack of real practical performance because of those inaccessible specs make me feel like this is just a B tier frame. It's above average in a lot of ways, but it's just so hard to use. Next up, we have the Babolat Pure Aero 100. So this is the standard Babolat Aero. These ones have dampening tech, whereas the Rafa line, the pink and yellows, do not have dampening tech. So this is going to be one of the most muted frames in Babolat's lineup. I would say maneuverability is a little bit below average. I think it could be a little bit whippier, though it does feel quite solid. It's tremendously stable, has really strong access to power. I don't mind the paint job, but I don't think it really stands out. I think there are rackets that deliver more spin in the spin category than the Aero 100, and that is why it is simply going to be ranked at average. Next up, we have the Babolat Pure Aero Rafa. This is my racket of choice, and I think this is one of the most unique rackets on the market. It comes in lighter than average at 290 grams, but I think it really competes well with most 300 gram rackets because you are going to be dealing with a higher swing weight. The swing mechanics on this frame, because of that high swing weight and a higher balance point, mean that it actually swings incredibly fast and delivers a tremendously heavy ball because you have all this weight behind the frame. No dampening tech again. We do have the more open pattern, so the Origin and the Aero 100 have a tighter pattern than the Rafa, so the Rafa is actually going to deliver a little bit more spin and a tremendously special and connected pure graphite feel because we don't have to deal with this crappy dampening tech. This is the most spin-friendly racket I've ever tested, one of the most solid and connected feeling rackets on the market, let alone the 100 square inch segment. And the final Babolat that I've tested, as I have not had the opportunity to test the standard Strike 100, is the Strike 16x20. On paper, this would be like such a great platform racket. We get the tighter pattern, more forgiving head size, and much easier to use specs than the standard Strike 98. But anything above this Babolat stripe, all this upper hoop region, and even kind of like central balls, if you're not hitting it down low, there's no performance. It's super jarring, super tinny, no plow through, barely any stability. This is one of the least pleasant rackets that I've ever tested, having the chance to test it down at Tennis Warehouse last fall, and it was one of the most disappointing. I thought this was a racket that could be absolutely excellent on paper, but the swing weight at like low 310s is simply inadequate for what you need to deliver in the modern game. Next up, we're going to talk Bolt 100. This is one of my personal favorite rackets in the racket collection behind me. It is so fun to use. You get the suspension technology, 3, 9, and 12 o'clock. You get way more spin, way more stability, and way more power than any racket on this list. But the major cons are it's hideous. The maneuverability is not good because you get this. These are graphite strips, additional graphite strips, creating the suspension tech. It's a lot to swing through the air, creates a lot of extra mass in the hoop, and the control kind of sucks. But that said, if I want to make someone laugh, I'll bring this racket to my hit with them, because with no exceptions, it is fun and hilarious to use, and so that's why it is going in S. The fun factor at PAX is absolutely colossal. Next, let's talk Tecnifibre. So this is the TFX1, Tecnifibre's power line, endorsed most notably by Corentin Moutet, the great French magician. This is one of the thickest beam rackets on this list, so huge amount of power, but the problem with this frame is the control is not great, but the even worse problem is the swing weights are a bit out of control. So these are foam filled, which means that the QC variance is going to be harder for Tecnifibre to deal with, and that's leading to higher swing weights than most people can manage. My personal copy of this one came in at 340 strung, which is just way outside what I'm comfortable with at this point, what most players should use. For me, it swings actually a lot like the Sinner racket, which also means you have to string it like 60 pounds to get any control, and with the comfort already being bad due to relatively ineffective dampening tech in the handle, you're left with something that is uncomfortable, jarring, tinny feeling, yet also kind of disconnected from the ball in a package that is overwhelmingly powerful and hard to use. On the other side, we've got the T-Fight 300, which is an absolute gem. This is a fantastic playing racket, super fast through the air, really responsive, raw, connected feel. Comfort's not the best, but the balance of power to control is very manageable for a lot of players. The one problem with this racket, like, I love it from all areas of the court. Great spin, very good stability considering how fast it swings. But the issue for me with this frame is the 300S exists, meaning the 98 square inch version. I do think this is still solidly an A-tier racket, like, it's great, but I don't think it offers much in terms of extra forgiveness or power compared to the 300S, so it's hard to recommend even though it's so great. This is something I wish that I can wholeheartedly recommend this racket to anyone, but I'll always go, did you try the 98? Moving on from there, let's go Wilson. First up, we have the Clash Pro. I haven't tried the regular Clash, but I am going to talk about it a little bit here. I don't really understand the purpose of the Clash Pro, because when you're looking at the Pro, it's a heavier model, right? What is the point of a heavier model with, I think it has a denser string pattern too with an extra cross? What is the point of adding those things to a racket that simply peters out at the 4.0 level? This racket does not scale well, so it's great for intermediate players, but as you get to become more advanced towards like 4.0 and higher, the flex leads to such an unpredictable experience with higher ball speeds that it simply becomes unusable. So I don't understand the point of the Clash Pro, and because of that, I'm putting it in D tier. I think the standard Clash, on the other hand, makes a huge amount of sense. That is one of those rackets that you have to respect, because it's the difference between someone playing tennis and not playing tennis. These Clashes are so comfortable. They've done such a great job of making it actually quite stable for how flexy it is, and pretty decent access to power and spin as well, as long as you're dealing with medium to low ball speeds. Anything higher, anything incoming at you heavier, the racket's just going to bend and twist too much, and the extra weight from the Clash Pro doesn't give you enough stability for it to be manageable at any kind of decent level. On from that is the Shift 300, which is kind of like the evolution of the idea of what a Clash is, but in spin technology form. I find this actually a very fascinating racket due to the amount of people who have tried to switch to it and then failed. But for me, it has one major issue, and that's the flex profile. Incredibly stiff torsionally, so off-center performance, it doesn't twist at all. It's very stable through contact, but feels so stiff, so it's quite jarring. And then if you go to add a little bit of loop on the ball, you're suddenly met with a much softer feel due to the lateral bending they have implemented, which I find you actually notice, but I don't think it's a good idea. So if you go for spin, you get almost this slingshotting motion of the racket hoop bending upwards. And to me, that just leads to like a bit of an inconsistent response. You have to really change what you expect from the racket depending on how you're going to swing the frame. That's not something I like. Beyond that, the players who I've seen tried to switch to this racket, my friend Cade from MP Tennis, who loved it, played great tennis with it, it hurt his arm, so he couldn't, and he's a young, strong player who shouldn't be having arm issues. Then we had Maria Sakkari, who used it for like one match professionally, lost, and dumped it immediately. And finally, we have Nika Racic from Intuitive Tennis, who spent several months with this thing, seemingly was playing good tennis with it, but having picked up an arm injury from another racket, the Shift did nothing to take any of that sting away, and led to some confusion in his game, that arm not healing, and him having to ultimately switch to the Babolat Pure Drive for a more comfortable option, which is hilarious because it's not known as a comfortable frame. So this is effectively an unusable racket by most accounts, and I'm putting it in D. Now you're probably thinking, Beckett, you just hate Wilson, don't you? Absolutely contraire. The Pro Staff X I love. This is a great example of Wilson successfully distilling what makes the Pro Staff in itself a great racket and putting it into a larger head size. You get all of that Pro Staff feel in a more forgiving package. This is a racket I often recommend to people who want an easier to use Gravity Pro with easier access to spin, but retain a comfortable and very solid feel. I love this racket. I think it's very usable, even at 3.5. If you're one of those players who kind of over muscles the ball, you need something to help loosen up your swing. The Pro Staff X is definitely one. This is an A tier frame for me. I really like this racket. I think it's fantastic. A racket that I think is the definition of C tier is the Blade 100. It is so average. It is so okay at everything. Can you hit spin? Yes. Will you hit overwhelming or great spin? No. Is it stable? Yeah, stable enough. Is it powerful? No, but it's powerful enough. Does it give you great control? No, but it gives you enough control that you can always trust it. This is a racket that I think is great for the kind of player who gets really in their head about what racket they're using. If you're the kind of player who just, it's like you use a Pure Drive, you freak out because you hit long. You use Gravity Pro, you freak out because you hit in the net. You just want something super medium that blends into the background, lets you focus on your tennis. That's where the Blade 100 shines. So I think it is C tier, but I think there's valid use case for C tier frames, and I think the Blade 100 is a great example. Next up, let's talk print. So I just did a very fun video on a couple of Prince frames, the Phantom 100X being one of them. What's really cool about this is it's a callback to the Prince XO3 Tour used by David Ferrer. So for a Phantom, this has a pretty high stiffness. I think it's like 66 strum. Don't get too afraid by the 16 by 18 string pattern. It is very dense, very control oriented. Don't get afraid of the O ports either. The feel is a bit unique, but you're not spraying the ball with this thing. Control is absolutely there. You get amazing ball pocketing from this frame as well. It is tremendously fun to use. Very strong, very pure racket identity. You can get huge spin as well. The O ports plus the very wide head shape lets you really brush up the back of the ball, take advantage of a very wide spin window. This is one of my most fun play tests of the year, but the lack of power, the lack of stability, the fact that this is a 100 square inch racket with the effective sweet spot smaller than a V-Core 95 and a pretty high swing weight means that I think it kind of averages out at C tier. Kind of bad playability, but amazing specialness right in the middle. Next up, the Prince Ripcord 100. This is one of the, again, most unique rackets on this list and was a very fun play test for me. Huge spin because you're getting a very wide spin window, again, where you can really brush up the back of the ball. And this is the most raw, the most connected, the most vibration of any racket on this list. On the downside, that means comfort's not great, can be a bit jarring, can be a bit hollow feeling. Control could be improved as well. That said, I think there's a huge amount of upwards potential for future versions of the Ripcord, and I think that should really be celebrated because it has such a competitive advantage in terms of feel in a segment where generally 100 square inch rackets are known to have not great feel. I think it is above average, but it is just simply not well-rounded enough to be up in A. Next up, Carve 100. So Carve, if you haven't heard of them, quite frankly, they just make knockoff rackets. This is one of two models that they produce. The Carve 100 is a fake pure Aero, and the Carve 97, the other one, is a fake pure Pro Staff. What makes these rackets unique is they're coming in at a very accessible price point, roughly half the price of your standard pure Aero. The construction is graphite and fiberglass, so the feel's a little bit more connected than your standard pure Aero 100 here, but you're not getting quite the same amount of power, spin, or stability. I don't think it really is like an inferior playability experience. It plays fine, even though it does have fiberglass, but I don't think it stands out in any way. I would put this in C tier were it not for the price. I think that price in a time of global economic uncertainty when, you know, you're getting hit by tariffs, having that lower price is something that's really important to have these days, and that is where the Carve excels. It's an unignorable fact. Next up, we got Dunlop. This is the CX 400 Tour. So we're getting a box beam construction, flat beam. It's 23 millimeters. The only other racket on this list, except for the Percept, that has this flat beam box construction is the Pro Staff X. So you're getting actually quite a similar Pro Staffy feel experience out of the 400 Tour. The feel is certainly above average. I think the balance of playability is maybe just mid. It's not exceedingly stable, not exceedingly powerful. Control, I think, is something that could really be improved, and same with spin. Compared to some of Dunlop's other rackets, I do like that the swing weight is coming a little bit higher, so it's a racket that you can customize with tail weight to kind of dial it into your specs. But that said, I just don't think there's enough with this racket that's standing out to take it out of C tier and into B. It's a solid frame with decent personality, honestly, but the balance of playability is just not enough. One racket that excels in playability, though, is the FX 500. So this is my friend Kyle from Winners Only, racket of choice right now. Speaking of Winners Only, check out this new shirt Tango just released comparing Taylor Fritz to a bunch of other dinos. I think that's like a hilarious shirt. I can't believe someone made something like this, and I wear it with deep pride. So the FX 500, I think, has potentially best-in-class torsional stability, so you hit this baby off center, you won't even feel it. Part of that is from a sort of suspension technology, so it's called Power Groove. A channel lies underneath the grommets to allow the grommets to flex in and out. That does two things: increases stability and comfort. So you're getting a little bit of more disconnection from that flexing from the string bed and the ball, so I think the feel could be a little bit more connected. But because of that huge stability, that great power, and honestly decent control, decent predictability off the string bed, I do think this is an above average frame, clocking in at B tier. Moving on, we've got Diadem. So this is the Nova 100. Interesting thing about the Nova 100 and the Nova Tour, which are the same mold, is the mold is incredibly similar to the Pure Drive, with one big difference, and that is overall thinner. So the Pure Drive's mold clocks in at maximum thickness at 26 millimeters, whereas the Nova is at 23, making this effectively the least powerful power line on the market today. I have a couple of issues with the Nova. I think across the board, the playability is simply fine. It delivers decent power, nothing crazy, but nothing bad. Stability is solid. You get a very uniform performance across the string bed. So those are all good things. But my problem is, number one, it has velvet paint, which I just really don't like. I think it's an ugly frame. And that doesn't matter that much. And number two is the execution of dampening tech by Diadem. I think they have the weakest implementation of dampening. So you take out a lot of vibrations, so you don't know what's going on with the string bed, but you don't add that much comfort. There were times where I felt the ball be jarring on this frame, but didn't feel the richness and purity of a strong central contact, which that's what I think is so amazing about Babolat and the Pure Drive. Like, you can really feel when you make good contact, but if you make bad contact, you can also feel it, but it doesn't punish you. It's like you know what was wrong, but it doesn't hurt. With the Nova, you don't know what was wrong, and usually it's not going to hurt, but it's just not an effective application of it. So for me, it's C tier because it does have strong overall playability. I would not put this in D tier. It's not really lacking in any meaningful way, but I think the dampening tech is worth mentioning. The Nova Tour, I think, sits right alongside it. It is a very interesting weight distribution, so very, very headlight for the Nova Tour. For me, it was kind of clunky. Usually you would think headlight rackets give you a very precise feel of where the head is. I didn't feel that with the Nova Tour. It was clunky, not super maneuverable for me, but I think there's a player where that will be right for it. To me, they're both just C-tier frames. A Diadem racket I do really like, and I think this is probably Diadem's best racket, is the Axis 100. If I couldn't use the Pure Aero Rafa today, the Axis 100 would be the racket I use. Huge spin potential here. Couple major differences between the Axis and the Aero Rafa is you're getting a tighter string pattern with the Axis, so better directional control on flatter balls for me for sure. The beam really cuts through the air fast, has a slightly more head-heavy bounce, just like the Rafa, so you get a lot of whippiness through the strike zone, especially if you have a big kind of laggy forehand stroke like I do. I think the paint job is decent. You don't have that crappy velvet paint here. But again, I think the application of dampening tech is below market average. I think you're too disconnected from the ball. It has kind of a weird tinny hitting noise, which I don't like. I just get more power, more spin, more stability out of my Rafa compared to the Axis, even though the Axis has better control and comfort. I do still think that makes it an A-tier racket. I think this is the second best kind of spin 100 frame on the market right now when it comes to RPMs, and I think it's a great, like I said, I think it's Diadem's best. Next up, I want to talk head. So this is the Speed MP 18x20, pretty heavy. These bad boys are clocking in at a very high swing weight. Again, between the MP and the Pro in the colorway that you see here, I just have to complain about me not liking the velvet paint, especially since apparently the velvet paint costs more to produce. Listening to the product manager on Tennis Nerd, Dennis, talk on Tennis Nerd, I just don't get it. Overall playability is strong. I think they're a bit muted and they do lack personality and specialness in terms of how they feel and play, but there's no major weaknesses. Spin production for an 1820 is very strong. It's a bit heavy, so I think you're limited to like 4.5 plus with the Speed Pro because they're coming in at higher swing weight. But previous versions have had quite a bit of hoop flex and lack of stability in the upper hoop, which I think was well remedied for the current Speed Pro in 2024 Auxetic 2.0. So I'm putting it in B, above average, but lacking specialness or really excelling in any specific category. I just think spin, power, control, stability, they're all fine. None of them are great. The Speed MP, I think, is a little bit more special feeling. It's very whippy. Swings quite fast when you consider it's a 100 square inch head size with generally a 330 swing weight strung spec. That's quite a lot of racket, but I don't think it's too much racket for a lot of players just because The way the weight's distributed, it swings nice, it swings fast. But that being said, this is again a racket that I just pick up and I never feel any kind of inspiration. Much like the blade, it kind of sits in this area where it blends into the background, but I think you can easily hit a much heavier ball with the Speed MP than the blade, and that's why it's up in B, whereas the Blade 100 is down in C. Next up, we have the Gravity MP. So this is, again, a teardrop shape with a very wide spin window, so you can really brush up a huge amount of spin on the ball. I think the Exotic 2.0 is certainly an improvement over the Exotic 1.0. I personally really like the 360 Plus entire lineup. From head, I think the connection to the ball is a bit more pure, a bit more graphite-y. You didn't have so much flexy feel. This still has quite a bit of flexy feel, and this is one of those rackets that doesn't scale that well. So great at lower ball speeds. Once you start getting to 4.0, 4.5, it's going to be a lot of hoop flex and a lot of bending, and it takes quite a bit of weight to get rid of that. You can cure it with weight in the Gravity MP in a way that you can't really with the Clash, but you're talking about 345 grams, 330 swing weight, which is a lot of racket to be using at the end of your second set. And so because of that, I think it's B. We do have like best in class paint job. I love how these gravities look, and they are more fun. They produce more fun factor than the speeds, but they just don't perform quite as well. On the other hand, the Gravity Pro, this is my favorite racket from head right now. 100 square inches, amazingly spin friendly, 18 by 20 pattern. I think this is one of the best updates, sneaky updates as well. A lot of people aren't really talking about how head actually seriously improved this racket to help it appeal to wider audiences, because it's kind of stood in the release shadow of the Gravity 98. So for the Exotic 2.0, we've got lower swing weight. So the big problem with the last couple of Gravities is they felt too heavy. They were too clunky and hard to swing. Easy to write off for a one-handed backhand. These new ones, I think you can easily use a one-handed backhand. 325 swing weight on average. We've got a lower balance point as well, so more headlight, easier to clear and get that racket face around. I think they have only made this racket better by making it lighter. You're losing a bit of stability, obviously, from the lower swing weight, but it still feels as solid as ever. It just doesn't get pushed around. The Gravity Pro is a fantastic frame. Last up from head, we have the Boom MP, and I do regret to inform you that I have not had the pleasure of trying the Extreme MP. It just hasn't come across my way. I haven't intentionally avoided it, but I'm not gonna seek it out based on just how uninspiring the majority of head rackets have been for me lately. The Boom MP, though, is one that I do really like. I think this racket actually has a lot of personality. The feel is one of the more connected ones in head's lineup, in my opinion. I like the teardrop shape. Allows you to hit higher up in the string bed and brush up more at the top of the string bed, which gives you better leverage on the ball for more spin, more power. Like both of those things, it's very head light considering it comes in under spec compared to average, so 295 grams instead of 300. Things I don't like is the sweet spot. I wouldn't call edge to edge. You get a noticeably different response on center where the string bed is pretty dense versus off center where it can be a bit launchy due to a more open string bed. So I'd like to see them even out the hitting experience. I do think this is a great racket. It is very fun to use. You can access huge spin, huge power, and still feel pretty connected to the ball. So for me, the Boom MP is sternly an A tier. I like this racket. Last up, end of the alphabet time, it is Yonex. We're going to start off really hot right now with the Percept 100D. This is one of my favorite frames from Yonex, my favorite 100 square inch rackets right now. I think you get a very unique identity with this frame. I love that the Percepts don't have VDM. You get a cleaner, clearer connection to the ball with servo filter. The 18 by 19 string pattern, I think, really accentuates what this frame and mold is great at, and that's striking straight through the ball. You get tremendous amounts of depth and directional control. It's easy to hit deep into the court and also to change direction. But beyond that, access to spin is surprisingly accessible. It takes weight tremendously well. This is a racket I'm very happy to recommend to a huge range of players. You get an edge-to-edge sweet spot as well. This is a great frame, easily in S tier for me. I do think that with the standard 100, though they're both great frames, you do lose a little bit of the magic in terms of identity from the D. The 100, you maybe get a little bit more variation from easier access to spin and a slightly lower weight. But I think what you really want to use the Percept 100D for is just bludgeoning big flat balls left to right and crushing your opponent. Like Robin Soderling would or something like that. Whereas the Percept 100 is a little bit more crafty, maybe a little bit better for doubles. Still a great racket at the end of the day, but the pattern, for me, the string pattern is the difference between A and S. Next up, we have the VCore 100. This is a racket I have to admit I've gone a little bit cold on. I feel like VDM... There was a time where it didn't bother me so much, but it's starting to bother me more and more. These VDM Yonex rackets don't have this personality. They make it hard to adjust your strokes and feel like you're improving your game on the fly. You get this disconnection from the ball that I don't like. There are some things about this VCore that I do really like. I like this teardrop shape. Like I said, it's really wide. You can really access a tremendous amount of spin. Because of VDM, also comfort is great. I think the VCores feel better than the EZONEs. That's me personally. But you get inconsistencies in the upper hoop. You get a little bit of launchiness. You're a bit too disconnected from the ball. Like, I personally would rather use this than these 3 head frames right now. But I think for the average player, this is probably standing when you're comparing it to what other spin rackets. I think it's a little bit behind the Aero 100. Okay, last up is the EZONE 100. For me, this is one of the most well-rounded frames on this entire list. Power to control ratio is very strong. You get a huge amount of power, but a very consistent launch angle. This thing is consistent edge-to-edge sweet spot. You get a very consistent response. Stability is phenomenal. In stock form, this thing can return tremendously heavy balls. Like, it holds up to a 5.0, 5.5 level caliber ball in stock form. That's how stable these are. But again, we're plagued with VDM. We have this tremendously disconnected feel. It's really hard to make adjustments to your game on the fly because the racket just does not tell you what's going on. This is a racket that I loved right at the beginning. I was enchanted by how strong the playability was, but it's a racket that as I kept hitting it, I didn't really want to spend... I stopped enjoying my time on court with it because it leaves you so empty and so disconnected. I do still think the strengths in terms of playability are simply overwhelming, and it can't possibly be below A because, like, it's a 10 out of 10 on paper, but it lacks that personality that you really want from something that you're just going to be having fun with, because tennis is all about fun. So that is my 100 square inch tier list for 2025. Let me know where you think I went wrong. What rackets in those 100 square inch list do you think I should try next that I've missed? Notably, I would also say I'm missing the Slinko Blackout. I was hoping I'd be able to put the V2 on here, but I needed to make a video and the V2's launch is delayed. Unfortunately, a little bit longer, but I'm really looking forward to putting that baby very high on the tier list for next time. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you